At 8:47 a.m. on December 14, Prince William placed a phone call that palace insiders described as the most difficult of his life. The conversation lasted 11 minutes, and by the time it ended, the future of the monarchy had shifted in ways no one anticipated. What forced that call were files unsealed just hours earlier, files that revealed a truth the institution had buried for over 30 years. The unsealing. The morning began in silence, not the comfortable quiet of a winter Saturday, but the heavy anticipatory stillness that settles over London when something significant is about to break. At the Royal Courts of Justice on the Strand, a single judge had arrived before dawn, flanked by court officials who understood the gravity of what was about to occur. The courtroom, normally bustling with barristers and spectators, remained empty except for a handful of palace representatives and legal observers who had been granted access under strict confidentiality protocols. At precisely 6:02 a.m., Justice Margaret Thornhill entered her chambers and signed the order that would change everything. The sealed documents held in classified status since 1996 were to be released to public record effective immediately. The files contained correspondence, financial agreements, and legal negotiations between Princess Diana and the royal household during the final months of her marriage to Prince Charles. They had been sealed by court order during the divorce proceedings, protected by privacy laws that were meant to shield both the institution and Diana's memory from unnecessary exposure. Within minutes of the order being signed, notifications reached Buckingham Palace. A senior legal advisor, already awake and monitoring the situation, immediately contacted Kensington Palace. The call reached Prince William's private secretary at 6:15 a.m. The message was brief but urgent. The Diana files have been unsealed. His Royal Highness needs to be informed immediately. William was already awake, sitting in his private study with a cup of tea, reviewing briefing notes for upcoming engagements. When his secretary knocked and entered, the expression on the man's face told William everything he needed to know before a single word was spoken. "The files?" William asked quietly. His secretary nodded. "Released this morning. The court has published them electronically. Media outlets will have access within the hour." William sat down his tea, his hand steady despite the sudden tightness in his chest. He had known this moment was coming. The legal battle over the files had been ongoing for nearly 2 years, and palace lawyers had warned him repeatedly that the outcome was uncertain. But knowing something intellectually and experiencing it emotionally were entirely different things. "Send me everything," William said. "I want to see the full contents before anyone else does." By 6:45 a.m., the files had been transmitted securely to Kensington Palace. William sat alone in his study as the documents populated his screen. Page after page of legal correspondence, financial settlement drafts, handwritten notes from his mother and formal agreements that bore both Diana's signature and the palace's official seal. The first thing that struck him was his mother's handwriting. He had seen it before, of course, in letters she had written to him as a child, in birthday cards, in notes tucked into his school trunk. But seeing it here in the margins of legal documents, annotated with questions and concerns and occasional bursts of frustration, felt like encountering her ghost in a place he had never expected. The second thing that struck him was the complexity. These were not the documents of a woman being silenced or coerced. They were the documents of someone negotiating, strategizing, and fighting for specific outcomes that mattered to her. And as William read deeper, one theme emerged again and again. Diana had been protecting her sons. Across the city, journalists were beginning to receive the same files. Newsrooms at the BBC, The Times, The Guardian, and every major outlet scrambled to assign reporters, historians, and legal experts to parse the contents. Within 30 minutes, the first headlines began appearing online. Sealed Diana documents finally public. Diana's financial settlement revealed, after decades, what the palace didn't want you to know about Diana's divorce. The tone of the coverage was cautious at first, almost hesitant. Editors understood they were handling something fragile, something that touched not just history but living people. But as the morning progressed and more details emerged, the narrative began to solidify. Diana had signed agreements that limited her ability to speak publicly about the royal family. She had accepted financial terms that, while substantial, came with conditions, and she had done it all while navigating a system that held far more power than she did. In New York, where it was just past 1 in the morning, CNN interrupted its programming with a breaking banner. Sealed Diana files released content shocking. American morning shows already preparing for their weekend broadcasts began reworking their entire rundowns to focus on the story. For American audiences, particularly those old enough to remember Diana's death in 1997, the unsealing felt like reopening a wound that had never fully healed. William understood this. By 7:30 a.m., he had read enough, and now he faced a choice that no amount of royal training had prepared him for. The contents no one expected. The documents, thick with legal language and structured in the formal style of 1990s court filings, told a story that William had never fully known. He had been 14 years old when his parents' divorce was finalized in August 1996, old enough to understand that something painful was happening, but too young to grasp the mechanics of what his mother had been navigating behind closed doors. The earliest document in the collection was dated March 1993, just months after the formal announcement of Charles and Diana's separation. It was a letter from Diana to her solicitor, handwritten on Kensington Palace stationery, outlining her priorities as divorce negotiations began. The letter was striking in its clarity and focus. "I need 3 things protected," Diana had written in her neat flowing script. "My ability to remain involved in my sons' lives. Their financial security is independent of whatever happens to me, and my freedom to continue the work I believe matters." William read the letter twice, his throat tightening. He had never doubted his mother's love or her commitment to him and Harry, but seeing it articulated so plainly at a time when her own life was unraveling hit him with unexpected force. But what surprised William most were Diana's counterproposals documented in a series of letters between her legal team and the palace. She had pushed back not on the financial terms but on the restrictions. In one particularly pointed letter dated November 1994, Diana's solicitor had written to the palace's legal representative arguing that the proposed confidentiality clauses were too broad and would prevent the princess from defending herself if future controversies arose. The palace's response, drafted by a senior lawyer whose name William recognized, was firm but not unkind. "The institution's position is that mutual discretion serves both parties. We are prepared to increase the financial settlement to $18.5 million and guarantee continued security provisions, but the confidentiality terms are non-negotiable." William could see the negotiation unfold across the pages. Diana, advised by her legal team, had made a calculated decision. She would accept the confidentiality restrictions in exchange for 2 specific guarantees. First, that William and Harry would retain their places in the line of succession without any ambiguity or challenge. Second, that their financial inheritances from both the Spencer family and the royal family would be protected through trust structures that could not be altered without their consent once they reached adulthood. A memo from Diana's financial advisor dated January 1996 spelled it out plainly. "The princess has prioritized her son's long-term security over her own immediate freedom. She believes, and I concur, that accepting these terms now will prevent future disputes that could harm the young prince's positions within the institution." William leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling of his study. His mother had traded pieces of her own autonomy to protect him and Harry. She had accepted restrictions on her voice, her story, her ability to defend herself publicly because she believed it would secure their futures. But the files contained something else, something that twisted the narrative in a way William had not anticipated. Interspersed among the legal documents were handwritten notes, fragments of Diana's internal dialogue as she processed what she was agreeing to. One note, undated but clearly written during the negotiation period, read simply, "I hope they understand someday why I chose this." Another note scrolled in the margin of a financial agreement draft said, "Not about the money. Never about the money. It's about making sure they have choices I didn't." William felt something crack inside him. Not anger, not resentment, but a profound sadness that his mother had carried this burden alone, that she had made these choices, knowing her sons were too young to understand, hoping that someday, somehow they would. The typed portion confirmed her acceptance of the final terms. The handwritten postscript added in blue ink read, "I've done what I can. The rest is up to them. Please ensure these files are sealed. If they're ever opened, I want my boys to see that I tried." William's vision blurred. He set the document down and pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to hold himself together. Outside his study window, the December morning was gray and cold, the kind of day that felt like it might never fully brighten. He heard a soft knock. Catherine entered quietly, carrying a fresh cup of tea. She sat it down on his desk without a word, then saw the expression on his face and understood immediately. "You've read them," she said gently. William nodded, unable to speak. Catherine pulled a chair beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Whatever is in those files," she said quietly. "Your mother loved you. That was never in question." William finally found his voice, though it came out raw. "She gave up so much. To protect us, and I never knew." Catherine squeezed his hand. "Now you do. And that knowledge, painful as it is, means something." William nodded slowly. But the knowledge also brought a terrible new burden. Because in less than 2 hours, the rest of the world would begin forming their own interpretations of these files. And unless someone who understood the full context spoke, the narrative would be written by people who had never known Diana, never loved her, and never carried the weight of what she had sacrificed. The impossible position. By 7:50 a.m., the media coverage had intensified,